relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this weekend's upcoming bantamweight title fight over there in Denmark. The reigning champion, Dina Thorslund, versus the challenger, Deborah Anna E. Lopez, the former champion who is moving up in weight for this fight.
Deborah's moving up from flyweight all the way up to bantamweight.
Flyweight to bantamweight, that's essentially two weight classes, two divisions. Flyweight, super flyweight, up to bantamweight.
My feelings ain't changed. I got Dina Thorslund.
This is just a refresher. You know, Dina Thorslund, she's a characteristically aggressive fighter, a spiteful puncher, and a body puncher. A good one.
The signature punch is a leaping hook to the body.
Seen her drop a couple of girls with that shot. Dina Thorslund, in all likelihood, is going to be the aggressor, whereas Deborah is going to be the defender. Deborah, the pure boxer, the defensively minded fighter, the fighter that in all likelihood is going to go into survival mode once a couple of shots land.
She feels that power.
Deborah's 28 years old, whereas Dina's 29.
They're both orthodox fighters.
Lead with the left to set up the right. It's one of the few things these two fighters have in common.
Because there ain't much.
Polar opposites when it comes to their methodology. I reiterate, Dina Thorslund is a characteristically aggressive fighter, a spiteful one. The sport's professional record of 18 wins, no losses, no draws, 7 knockouts. A two-division champion, having reigned as a champion at both super bantamweight and currently at bantamweight.
I think Dina's going to put the squeeze on Deborah Anna E. Lopez. I think she's going to apply a lot of pressure. Deborah don't like pressure.
Deborah Anna E. Lopez, the pure boxer, the defensively minded fighter that's likely to create space and keep distance rather than close it.
It'll be Dina closing the distance. Dina, the naturally bigger fighter, naturally bigger woman.
Unbeaten, 18-0, whereas Deborah Anna E. Lopez, she sports a professional record of 20 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw, 1 knockout.
She's not a puncher.
She wasn't a puncher down there at flyweight. She's not going to all of a sudden become one at bantamweight.
She's not a puncher.
And because she's not a puncher, I don't get the sense she'll be able to keep Dina Thorslund off of her. I don't think she'll get Dina's respect. She couldn't get Tamara DeMarco's respect down there at flyweight in her last fight.
Her last title defense.
Didn't work out. She ended up getting outworked by Tamara DeMarco, who pried the WBO title away from her, ended up losing that title in her very next fight to Gabriela Alaniz. That's another story.
Back to Deborah.
Deborah's never been stopped, you know. She's a defensively minded fighter. That's her bread and butter. That's what she's good at. Economic, 1 and 2 shots at a time, creating space, creating distance.
She ain't got the work rate for this assignment or the power.
Though because Deborah's young and she's defensively minded, defensively responsible, she doesn't take very many chances throughout the course of a round. I could see her going the distance and losing a wide unanimous decision. Losing a wide unanimous decision to Dina Thorslund, who in all likelihood, if she don't end up stopping her, at minimum she'll outwork her.
At minimum.
That's the least I expect. That's the least Dina Thorslund can do. Dina Thorslund, who saw action once, just once last year in April, opposite the ring Yorkis Carreno.
She won a unanimous decision.
It was the only fight that she had last year, and it's unfortunate because the bantamweight division, you know, the world titles at bantamweight, they're split 4 ways between 4 champions. The division itself is a densely populated, talent-rich division, and you would have hoped that Dina would have got to fight more than once, just once, the entire calendar year, but that's how it happened.
She wasn't that busy last year. Hopefully she'll be more busy this year.
Maybe her handlers can move her into a unification match. There are 3 other champions at this weight. You got Nina Hughes holding the WBA, Yulihan Luna holding the WBC, and Ebony Bridges holding the IBF.
Dina's one of 4 champions at this weight.
She's going to stay one. She's going to stay a champion. I like Dina Thorslund to win. At minimum, I think she can win a decision.
It's not saying that she can't knock out Deborah Anna E. Lopez. That's saying that Deborah might feel Dina's power, go into survival mode, and stop trying, start surviving.
At which point she might lose wide on the cards. I like Dina to win.
And the fact that this fight is going down in the first quarter of this year, that leaves Dina a lot of room to schedule other fights. I hope this year ends up being a more productive year for her than last year was.
This will be Dina's first fight this year, her first title defense.
First defense this year.
We'll see what she gets into later on, beyond this upcoming weekend's fight. Men's welterweight news. I'm sure most of you have heard by now. The WBC have found no conclusive evidence of intentional or knowing ingestion of clomiphene by Conor Benn. Incite his highly elevated consumption of eggs as reasonable explanation for his failed drug tests.
You're telling me this guy pissed hot because he ate a couple of omelets?
I'm not telling you anything. WBC's telling you that.
Well, all right.
The official statement from the WBC reads, Conor Benn completed his enrollment process in the WBC's clean boxing program in February of last year. Enrollment in the WBC's clean boxing program is mandatory for all fighters rated in the top 15 in the WBC's ratings. Accordingly, he was enrolled in the WBC's clean boxing program out of competition anti-doping testing in July of 2022, when the collection of the samples to which the WBC ruling being announced herein pertains took place.
All right.
On August 23rd of 2022, the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association notified Mr. Benn and the World Boxing Council that urine sample A collected from him on July 25th, 2022, in connection with his participation in the WBC VADA anti-doping testing program yielded an adverse analytical finding for clomiphene and its hydroxymetabolites M1 and M2. Clomiphene and its metabolites are banned substances at all times under the WBC CBP. Clomiphene is a metabolic modulator which promotes testosterone production and boosts testosterone levels while burning fat. On August 30th of 2022, the WBC notified Mr. Benn of the adverse finding and requested information and materials necessary to investigate the circumstances thereof. The WBC did not receive a substantive response until December of 2022. Mr. Benn denied at all times the intentional or knowingly ingestion of any banned substances. His defense against the adverse finding centered on allegations of potential laboratory analysis failures and irregularities in connection with the analysis of his samples and of the results of the samples testing. The WBC consulted several experts in anti-doping laboratory analysis, including an expert consulting with over 30 years of experience in WADA and IOC accredited laboratory settings. And the WBC concluded that there was absolutely no fault attributable to the laboratory that analyzed Mr. Benn's samples. Further, the WBC reaffirms the unquestionable integrity of VADA and the sample collection agencies and laboratories which service VADA.
Which services VADA uses in connection with the WBC's clean boxing program?
It was not until early January of 2023 that the WBC Results Management Unit was able to undertake the full substantive analysis of Mr. Benn's arguments and defenses. On January 26, 2023, members of the WBC Results Management Unit held an inquiry session with Mr. Benn and members of his legal team. In early February of 2023, Mr. Benn's team, for the first time, provided a detailed breakdown of Mr. Benn's diet and supplement consumption that could have directly affected the adverse finding. The WBC availed itself of the services of an expert nutritionist. The WBC experts provided information about the characteristics of the substance at issue in this case and examples of similar adverse findings in several sports under a diverse number of anti-doping programs.
Examples of guys who might have ate one too many omelets and tested positive for clomiphene.
WBC Board of Governors ruling was based on 1. The facts as known to the WBC at the time of the ruling. 2. Any extenuating circumstances applicable to the specific case at hand. 3. WBC rulings and precedential anti-doping violation cases. 4. The unbiased, commonsensical, and just analysis and recommendations of the WBC Results Management Unit. And 5. Credible and reliable health-related and scientific literature. The WBC found that there was no conclusive evidence that Mr. Benn engaged in intentional or knowing ingestion of clomiphene. There were no failures in the procedures related to the sample collection, sample analysis, or violations of Mr. Benn's B sample rights that would justify questioning or invalidating the adverse finding. And 3. Mr. Benn's documented and highly elevated consumption of eggs during the times relevant to the sample collection raised a reasonable explanation for the adverse finding. The WBC Nutrition Committee will work with Mr. Benn to design a nutrition program geared to avoid the risks of a future adverse finding caused by nutritional factors. Mr. Benn shall be subjected to regular anti-doping testing to monitor the effect of the WBC-ordered nutritional program. The WBC shall include Mr. Benn in its ratings during the period immediately following the issuance of its ruling. Mr. Benn's position in the WBC ratings shall be based solely on merit and customary factors, with the WBC's ratings committee applied to rating boxers.
So he's back.
According to the WBC, something in Conor Benn's diet is what led to the adverse finding, presumably eggs. That's what led to them finding clomiphene in his system.
You believe that?
Doesn't matter what I believe. What the people over there at Matchroom will likely move to do now is use the WBC's ruling to make their case, further make their case with the BBBOC.
Because you have to remember, Conor didn't fail any tests with UCAD. The tests that had the adverse finding in them were VADA tests.
Not UCAD tests. And the BBBOC adheres to UCAD's findings, not necessarily VADA's.
They've got their own anti-doping agency over there.
And while they sort all of that out with the BBBOC in order to allow Conor to box in the United Kingdom once more, he may end up fighting in the UAE very soon, in June.
June 3rd.
I think that's when they're trying to do the Bivol versus Better Beef fight, what could be the Bivol versus Buatsi fight if things don't work out with Better Beef.
This is the play.
Test positive for clomiphene?
Ow.
Blame it on omelets.
Ow.
Too many eggs. I'm not the least bit surprised that Conor Benn may be fighting abroad in his very next fight, not in the United Kingdom, his own backyard, because it may take some time to sort things out between the BBBOC and Conor.
There was some talk of doing a Pacquiao fight, if you can believe that.
Didn't touch on it at first, didn't know if I should believe it, but according to Boxing Scene, Pacquiao advisor says Conor Benn fight won't be considered until there is closure on positive drug tests.
Well, this is closure, isn't it?
What are we talking about, a real contest, a real fight? How old is Manny Pacquiao, 42, 43?
He's gonna fight Conor Benn. Conor Benn where it? Welterweight? Super welterweight?
Often Colt Junior middle. I don't know that any of us should hold our breath to see Conor Benn share the ring with Manny Pacquiao, though boxing is the theater of the unexpected. You never really know.
So, in a nutshell, he's back. Conroy is back.
And finally, the WBO have now officially ordered Janibek to defend his WBO middleweight world title versus Liam Smith next. Parties have 20 days until March 14th to agree to a deal. Then purse bids. Chris Eubank Jr. has already activated his rematch clause for a second fight versus Smith.
Well, that's the caveat, isn't it?
A few days ago, news broke that Chris Eubank Jr. exercised his rematch clause for an immediate second fight with Liam Smith. And I want to say that it's a bit ridiculous that Chris Eubank Jr., who's not a champion, has never been a full-fledged champion in the sport of boxing, actually had a rematch clause incorporated into the initial contract for his fight with Liam Smith. Liam Smith, he was brought there to lose, you know.
He was.
Whatever matchmakers put that fight together, they likely had Liam Williams in mind, a common opponent between Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr., and they thought to themselves, well, Chris Eubank Jr. handled Liam Williams well enough, he should be able to handle Liam Smith.
Admittedly, I thought that too.
Because Liam Williams and Liam Smith, there are some similarities there. They're both rough and rugged customers, mid-range to inside fighters that like to punch. And, you know, Chris, he handled Liam Williams all right. Should be able to handle Liam Smith.
Triangle theories don't work.
I understand that. Styles make fights, and Liam Williams and Liam Smith, they got a similar style.
The very last thing that I expected was that Chris Eubank Jr., who's otherwise known for having pretty good punch resistance, a decent chin, the last thing I expected was that he'd lose, and not just lose, get knocked out.
I didn't expect that. And because he had a rematch clause incorporated into their initial contract, there is that matter to be resolved. I don't know how much or how little Liam Smith wants to challenge for a middleweight title opposite the ring a guy like Janibek Alimkhanalai.
But I'll tell you what I think.
I like Smith versus Alimkhanalai more than I like Smith versus Eubank 2. Eubank 2, the rematch.
You can apologize for that.
Yeah, Chris has got a rematch clause, he's got one. I get that, I understand that, but as a boxing fan, as a consumer, I do like one of these fights a bit more than the other. For my money, I'd rather see Eubank Jr. versus Brook.
Kell Brook.
Kell Brook was eyeing the winner of Eubank versus Smith, you know. He was eyeing the winner of that fight. That's what the reports were ahead of the match.
I saw Ben Shalom saying something about that.
Part of me feels like Liam Smith, if he wants to fight for that title, if he wants that title shot with Janibek Alimkhanalai, his career should not be stifled by Chris Eubank Jr. and his rematch clause on the premise that it was a decisive victory. It was a knockout victory. Is there really a need for a rematch? I mean, I understand that Chris Eubank might want redemption, and I understand...
There's a legal precedence. There is a legal obligation to comply.
I understand it. I understand all of those things. What I'm talking about is preference, what I would prefer to see. I'd prefer to see Liam Smith take on Janibek than see him take on Chris again. Let Chris keep busy with Cal Brook or some other guy.
Feed him to Gennady Golovkin.
Isn't that the guy that Chris Eubank Jr. said he was targeting ahead of the Liam Smith fight, beyond that fight, because he was assuming he would win?
Feed him to Gennady, or feed Gennady to him.
Whatever works. I'm just saying, while Eubank versus Smith 2 likely does do good business in the United Kingdom on Sky Sports, it probably does. The more intriguing fight for me is the Janibek fight, because Janibek, you know, he looked human in his last fight opposite the ring, Denzel Bentley. And Denzel Bentley's not as experienced a fighter as Liam Smith. Lest we forget, Liam Smith is a former champion. He held the WBO title at junior middleweight.
So let's see if he can't win another title at middleweight.
It'd be a crying shame if he don't get to capitalize on that opportunity, because he's all held up with Chris Eubank Jr.
Chris wants revenge.
And as stated, I didn't expect that he would get knocked out, because over the years, if Chris Eubank Jr. has been known for something, he's been known for his gas tank, his engine, his punching power to some degree, and his ability to take a punch. So the idea that a guy who's more accustomed to campaign as a junior middleweight would knock him out at middleweight.
I wasn't expecting that.
I'm not making excuses for Chris Eubank Jr. I don't even like Chris Eubank Jr., but if I had to guess what happened there, the camp for the would-be Conor Benn fight and the subsequent camp that followed for the Liam Smith fight, that's likely the culprit. I suspect that Chris Eubank Jr., he greatly depleted himself. Those two camps.
Preparing for Conor.
Just for the fight to fall apart, then preparing for Liam Smith. I suspect those two camps in tandem with each other took something out of Chris. There must be some emphasis on nutrition ahead of what could be a rematch.
If Liam don't take the fight, Jaime Munguia is ranked right behind him.
He's ranked at number 2. Mayrim Nursultanov,
Janibek's countryman.
he's ranked at number 3. And Felix Cash is ranked at number 4, right behind Mayrim Nursultanov. Felix Cash, he's got a fight coming up, and if he makes it through that fight, he's supposed to fight Emma Williams.
See if he doesn't.
We'll see how the cookie crumbles. I'm not completely sure what's going to happen here.
Can they get Chris Eubank Jr. to stand down and step aside so that Liam can have this fight?
Does Liam want this fight? Does he actually want this title shot, or does he want to go right back in there with Chris Eubank Jr.?
I don't know, but we'll find out shortly.